In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. This book has thousands of 5-star reviews, so keep watching to see if I agree. Hi, I'm Linda and welcome to my YouTube channel, Better You Books, where I read and review books that help you to become a better version of yourself. In today's review of Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, I'll tell you more about the book. I'll let you know my key thoughts and insights, as well as my favourite quote, before finishing with who I recommend this book for and also giving it my star rating. So watch till the end to see what score I give it. Phil Knight is the founder of one of the world's most successful companies. However, he's also an introvert and little was known about him before he wrote this book. In the book, he talks about why he decided to write it. It might be nice to tell the story of Nike. Everyone else has told the story or tried to, but they always get half the facts, if that, and none of the spirit, or vice versa. This book was released in 2016 and it is a New York Times bestseller. Before reading this book, I had no particular interest in Nike and I'd never heard of Phil Knight before, but I had seen so many good reviews about this book, so I wanted to pick it up and see what all the fuss was about. Before we go any further, I feel I need to tell you what a shoe dog is, because I at least had no idea. A shoe dog is someone who's dedicated their life wholly to the buying, selling, making or designing of shoes. So now we all know. Shoe Dog chronicles Phil's life from 1962 when he decided to put what he calls his crazy idea into practice, all the way up to 1980 when Nike went public. Each year is a separate chapter, and in the conclusion, he documents some of the key events that have happened from 1980 onwards. This is the story of how Nike became a successful business against all the odds. Phil always loved sports, and his dream was to become a great sportsman. But unfortunately, he was good, but just not great, so that was not going to be his path. Instead, he went to business school, and during one of his assignments there, he came up with this idea of importing Japanese trainers into the US. He'd seen how successful that had been in the camera industry, which had once been dominated by the Germans, so he thought the same thing could work with shoes as well. The book starts in 1962 when Phil was just 24. He'd finished business school and he decided to put this idea into reality, so he pitched it to a Japanese shoe manufacturer. Surprisingly, they agreed, and he set up a company called Blue Ribbon Sports, going into partnership with his old running coach from university, Bowerman, who was very well respected in the running world. The company trades as Blue Ribbon for many years until they eventually start manufacturing their own shoes and become Nike. This book documents almost 20 years in the life of Nike and talks about all the many times that the company almost went bankrupt, from risky cash flow management to lawsuits to government threats and much, much more. Throughout the book, Phil demonstrates his passion for the brand and his resilience and determination to keep fighting. I'm now going to tell you my 3 key takeaways from the book, and I'm going to do so using excerpts from the book because Phil writes much better than I do. Number 1, the art of competing is the art of forgetting. Phil learnt this lesson in relation to his track career, but he realises the parallels with his business. He writes, "People assume that competition is always a good thing, that it brings out the best in people. But that's only true of people who can forget the competition. The art of competing was the art of forgetting. You must forget your limits. You must forget your doubts, your pain, your past." I thought this was really powerful, especially the bit about forgetting your limits and not letting what you think you can achieve stop you from reaching for more. And also realising that just because something hasn't worked in the past doesn't mean it won't work in the future. Number 2, don't let the fear of failure stop you from trying. Phil writes about this when they were setting up their first factory and none of them had any idea how to run a factory. He writes, "Fear of failure will never be our downfall as a company. Not that any of us thought that we wouldn't fail. In fact, we had every expectation that we would. But when we did fail, we had faith that we'd do it fast, learn from it and be better for it." And I really like this because he's not letting the fear of failure and the unknown stop them from trying, but also he realises that some failures are inevitable, but they can learn from them and make sure they do better next time. Number 3, don't ever stop. Phil talks about this at the beginning and the end of the book, and it seems to be his own personal mantra. At the start he writes, "Let everyone else call your idea crazy. Just keep going. Don't stop. Whatever comes, just don't stop." And at the end, in a slightly different context, he writes, "Sometimes you have to give up. Sometimes knowing when to give up, when to try something else is genius. Giving up doesn't mean stopping. Don't ever stop." These 3 words really summed up the book for me, as Phil faced so many challenges in the first few years of launching Nike, but he kept going and he definitely did not ever stop. I love quotes, and this is the one that stuck with me most from the book. "Beating the competition is relatively easy. Beating yourself is a never-ending commitment." The reason it resonated with me so much is because I'm extremely competitive, but mostly with myself. I really enjoyed this book. It was a real page-turner, which I had not expected, and I devoured it in a few days. It was extremely detailed, which I was surprised at because he was writing some of it 50 years after it happened. My favourite bits were probably when they were working with the Japanese, because I just found it so interesting, as Japanese business culture is just so different. I also really enjoyed learning about how they came up with the name Nike and the now iconic swoosh, because Phil didn't like either of them at the beginning, and he actually said, well, perhaps they'll grow on us. Phil is a really good storyteller. I feel like he could actually be a writer. There was a bit near the beginning where he went on his gap year, and when he was telling all the stories of the different countries, I found it really fascinating and I could picture myself there. I also enjoyed the historical backdrop as well, with mentions of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War, and the tragic 1972 Olympics. I found the conclusion extremely moving. There were some sad events that he recounted that set me off, but then I couldn't stop crying and I ended the book an emotional wreck. I like the way that this book was structured chronologically, with one chapter representing 1 year, which made it really clear. However, I do wish that the book had continued past 1980, because I think there is still a lot of stories left to tell, which he alluded to briefly in the conclusion. However, I can see why he did that, because it probably would have become too lengthy, and also I love underdog stories, so it was quite interesting to focus on the first few years of Nike, when it was really messy and there were so many troubles going on. However, if he brought out a sequel to this book, I would definitely buy it. After reading this book, I'm not really sure what I think about Phil. I was definitely rooting for him and Nike throughout the book, but I'm not sure that I would want him to be my manager. However, I've got to give it to him. He's extremely honest and vulnerable in the book, and he owns up to his past regrets. I really enjoyed this book. I did not expect it to be so gripping, and I definitely did not expect to cry. However, I didn't get as many insights from the book as I hoped I would, but in its defense, it's marketed as a memoir, so it doesn't promise that. So I'm giving this book 4.5 stars. I would recommend it to entrepreneurs, people who like business books, people who like Nike, people who like memoirs, or people who don't like any of those things, just because it's so well written and it's a really entertaining read. So I think that you would enjoy it. So go out and buy it. Just do it. Sorry, a bit too cheesy. This book has also been optioned by Netflix, so they're going to be making it into a movie, and I can't wait to watch that when it comes out. So what do you think? Are you interested in reading this book too? If so, drop me a comment below and let me know. I've also added a link in the description to this book if you want to go and buy it. And if you prefer listening to audiobooks rather than reading, it's also available on Audible. If you like the sound of this book but don't really have time to read right now, you can read the 7 key insights from this book in just 12 minutes by using Blinkist. I've included a link to a free trial below. Next week, I'm going to be reviewing Girl, Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis, which I think is the only book that I've ever read 3 times. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please click subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you'll be the first person to know about my future videos. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next time.